Now that we know the Nintendo Switch 2 numbers at this point with the 23 million plus units sold, we're seeing kind of how things are going. Things are progressing, I would say, even better than maybe even what Nintendo was expecting based off of some of their estimates and projections. There was something that was released earlier in the year that people aren't talking about right now. Now that we have Q1 numbers that we got from Nintendo and what they actually shipped, I think things are kind of interesting to see how it all played out. So I wanted to go back and take a look at that. There was a Twitter post that I found to be pretty amusing. And I also wanted to take a look at some big upcoming JRPGs. Fire Emblem Fortunes Weave got some brand new officially released information and footage, so we're going to check that out. Once again, it is officially released, no spoilers on this one, but it looks incredible. And Trails in the Sky second chapter, this is setting up to be a massive sequel to the original game here. There's something here that I did not expect with the game, so we're going to go over that as well. But before we continue, we are giving away a Nintendo Switch 2 at 140,000 subscribers or on September 1st, whichever comes first. Subscribe, like, comment. The winner will be chosen at random, and it's a worldwide giveaway. Thanks, peeps. Okay, let's talk about this. Over on Twitter, Super Nintendista, he had this to say, and it's a grok translation from Portuguese, so keep in mind, everything might not be exactly the correct, but it's the gist of what he's trying to say. Bloomberg faces embarrassment for criticizing the Switch 2's pace. The drop was Nintendo producing 4 million Switch 2 units in a single quarter. Bloomberg claimed that Nintendo would cut Switch 2 production by 33% from 6 million to 4 million units in the quarter, citing lower than expected demand in the US. 4 million consoles in just one quarter. So just real quick, I'm going to interject here. He's talking about the 3.82 million units that the Nintendo Switch 2 sold from April, May, and June. That's pretty much the same, I would say, timeline aligned that Bloomberg claimed that Nintendo was cutting back from like 6 million to 4, which would be impossible because then they wouldn't have enough systems to even supply for what they sold. So that's essentially what Mr. Nintendista is saying. And most importantly, this wasn't a sales figure released by Nintendo, but Bloomberg's own estimate based on sources that attributed the reduction precisely to weaker demand in the US. While the article tried to push a narrative of slowdown, the production number remains massive for a single quarter. Maybe the issue isn't the Switch 2's pace, maybe it's the size of the hype built around it. So I think it's interesting when you look at kind of like what happened with that, because people were trying to use that as some type of way to say that the Switch 2 is not doing well, or to double down on it had a terrible holiday, especially in the US, and nobody was buying it, and now they're in trouble. There were numerous videos of people doing that. And the funny thing is that now that we got the numbers down at this point, there were absolutely like grifter channels seething about the fact that they sold 23 million and talking about they overproduced, or there was some issues there, or that people are just panic buying it because of the price increase. There was a lot of excuses, and sure, you can say whatever you want to say, but I think that if you look at the facts, you look at the news, you look at the information, you look at the games that are out there, if you're someone who has a Switch 1, which there are millions upon millions of people, 100 million people plus, obviously the Switch 2 is going to be an impressive, or it's going to be a system that you're going to eventually have to get. This is just something that's a thing, and I've seen it all over the place. I saw it, I covered SkillUp's video when it comes to previews for Fire Emblem Fortunes Weave. There were numerous people in that comment section saying, okay, well now I have to buy a Switch 2. This was something that I saw on Twitter when they saw Fire Emblem. Once again, it's one of those things to where Nintendo has so many different franchises that speak to different audiences. When one of those games come out from those franchises, that person's going to buy that game. Maybe Donkey Kong, or let's just say something like Mario Party, or maybe Pokemon Legends Z8, or whatever games that have came out beforehand, Pokemon Pocopia, Star Fox, those weren't good enough. But when they get one game from that franchise that they do love, then they'll be like, okay, well, I can pick up that game later when it comes to like Star Fox or something that I didn't like, and then now I can get that game that I really want. So I can buy, let's say, Fire Emblem Fortunes Weave. That's the game that they're really excited for. They can get that game, and then they can also pick up Star Fox, or they can also pick up Pokemon, or pick up something else. This is something that's been common for Nintendo for a very long time at this point. Like, I've seen it a lot. So I'll even give you guys another example of this. This was somewhat of a popular post, 100K views plus on Twitter. And this person wrote, pretending I don't care about Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, so I don't have to buy a Switch 2. So that was just kind of like a funny post because they're starting to see something that they really like, which is Fire Emblem. Everything else has not been enough for them to pick up the system. It's something that they care about. So yeah, they're going to want to pick up a Switch 2 for that. And then in the comment section, a bunch of other people are talking about, hey, well, you better pick it up because of the price increase. Well, when's the price increase happening? So that's what's happening here, guys. There are going to be certain games, certain franchises that come out, and this is something that Nintendo knew. Nintendo didn't even have to respond to the Bloomberg article or anything like that because we all kind of knew it was probably not correct or false. It does seem like whatever estimates that Bloomberg got was incorrect because there's no way that you can cut production that much and then have enough to sell 3.82 million units in that quarter. If you were cutting production that much, there's something there. I do think that their estimates were off. I think that they were trying to push something to maybe affect stock for their paid buyers to say, hey, we can have this type of power. This type of stuff does happen. And it's not like everything is just morally correct and everything is just right and they're just trying to do what's right by everybody. That's not always the case, especially when there's a lot of money involved with a place like Bloomberg. So I do believe that that's what happened here. Shout outs to Super Nintendista for bringing that up. But I also want to give a shout outs to Fire Emblem and Intelligent Systems because what they've brought up here is a brand new CM commercials that show off the game, and it's looking just majestic. Now, it is Japanese commercials. We'll see about how they do for the US commercials, but man, it's looking great. It's looking sharper than ever. It looks like it's using its latest builds or whatever you want to say with it. It looks way sharper, in my opinion, what we're seeing here than the original trailer for the game, the first trailer for the game. So everything's just looking great, and it's showing off a variety of the characters, some funny stuff that's also happening here too. You see pretty much everybody in these commercials here, from Dietrich to Kai to just everything. It kind of just recaps kind of what's going on, but they also show off some new gameplay that we have not quite seen before. They kind of mix in some old stuff with some new stuff here too, kind of show a little bit of the beginning of some Blaze arts, and even just like the dungeon showdown here, it looks like between this character that has the gauntlet gun, and it kind of goes through each of the characters' stories. When it comes to Theodora, she's awesome. That part where she just smacks the guy aside is great. And also kind of her Blaze art with that incredible strength that she has with her arms. So I love just what I'm seeing, like across the board here. It seems like each of these characters are going to be epic here. Lita and what she does, you know, her dancing and how she lost her father, and she's on a revenge tour. And apparently she has like a hit list that she crosses off of people that caused that with her father. So I'm definitely excited to see how all of these four kind of paths play out. And of course, this gameplay looks smoother, looks sharper than what we saw before when it comes to the first trailer, which I knew that would happen. I mean, that always happens, especially with Intelligent Systems games. The structure of this game was interesting because some people are thinking, well, do you start out playing as one of the four characters first? And it's like a yes and no, because really you start out in the future. That's who the characters, you have Eshmel, who has been picked, has been chosen, summoned by Sodis. And you have to go back and change the fortunes of each of the characters in order to fight the great threat that's in the present of where all of Dagda is completely destroyed. So I think that is an interesting twist. Some people were thinking, was that a spoiler? But I think that if you play as Eshmel from the very beginning, then, I mean, you're going to have to say, like, what happens there. Because otherwise it's going to look like an okie doke. But either way, looks really good. Very excited about the game. I think it's going to do really well. I think that the whole situation, I know that there was some talk and there was people saying, oh, well, the $80, that's the biggest problem there. Some people calling Nintendo unhinged. Completely unhinged. They should be in a loony bid because Fire Emblem is just this crappy, small franchise that nobody cares about. It's not a multi-million selling franchise. It's not something that sold 5 million units. Nobody cares. Listen, guys, I like to have games as cheap as possible. Give me those games as cheap as possible. I'd rather have it to where Nintendo has it 70, 60, but once again, there are ways, especially here in the US, if you go to Amazon or if you go to Walmart, you can pre-order the physical copy of the game, which matches the digital copy. Digital is always going to be 70 when it comes to the Switch 2, so if you want to get it for 70, you can. The physical, when it comes to MSRP, at some places, is definitely going to be 80, so I would say if you want Fire Emblem and you want a physical copy, and you don't want to wait for a while before like a sale, because there will be a sale eventually, then definitely pre-order on Amazon or pre-order at Walmart. Now that we've seen a lot of this game, tons of fully voiced dialogue, like a lot, tons of characters, so much content in the game, all the different paths in the game, looking sharp, playing good. From the previews, even from the general reviewers, IGN and SkillUp and all that, they were floored. They were blown away and said that this is one of the most ambitious games on the Nintendo Switch 2, by far Intelligent System's most ambitious game. So it's living up to that full price tag. It's living up to that, even if you want to just get it for $70 on digital on the eShop. Some people were even saying it's not worth that it should have been $60, like let's just say, just like Fire Emblem Three Houses. But this is a significant bump over Three Houses in every single way from what I've seen so far, especially from the technical perspective. It just destroys it graphics-wise, but gameplay and all that, way better when it comes to how it integrates all of the characters and all that. So very excited to see more of Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave here. Now let's get into something else that I'm very excited to get into, because there's a game that launches the same day, and I can't believe it launches the same day. They couldn't work out something, and that is Trails in the Sky second chapter. We've got some information on the remake of the game. It's approximately 33.2 gigabytes on Switch 2 and 19.5 gigabytes on the Nintendo Switch 1. Shout outs to Stealth for putting out this information. And he also states that for comparison, Trails in the Sky First Chapter Remake was approximately 17.3 gigabytes on the Switch 2 and 9.7 gigabytes on the Switch 1. So what does this say with the huge file size bump? Well, one, there's far more content in Trails in the Sky second chapter. That has to be something. I'm guessing they're just porting over, they're using the same engine. So I don't think when it comes to Switch 1 to Switch 1 with the first chapter to second chapter that they've done some type of massive graphics overhaul or improvement. I'm pretty sure they're just reusing assets and textures and all of that. So why is there about a 10 gigabyte jump from there? Well, it has to be content wise, has to be, I would probably say, a lot of what they've added in, maybe music, other things like that. Now, the big thing with this one here, it's even more expensive for them to put out that Switch 1 version, because at 19.5 gigabytes on the Switch 1, that means you need a 32 gigabyte cartridge. So they're paying for a 32 gigabyte cartridge on the Switch 1, and they're also paying for a 32 gigabyte cartridge, or actually no, the 64 gigabyte cartridge, sorry, the 64 gigabyte cartridge on the Switch 2. So they are paying a premium for both of these games for the physical versions of it. So I do hope that people go out there and support it. I know it's coming out the same day as Fire Emblem, but I do think that them doing this, Falcom doing real physical versions on Switch 1 and on Switch 2 should be commended, considering the scope and scale and size of this remake. And Trails in the Sky second chapter looks awesome. Everybody has told me so far that this is the real deal. The first game is just the warm-up. It's just the appetizer. It's good, but the second game is so much better. So we could be looking at an high 80s, 90 plus game. I mean, the last Trails in the Sky first chapter, that was a high 80s game. So I do feel that Trails in the Sky second chapter can be even better. So on the same day, this September 17th, we're getting two GOAT tier RPGs, it seems like, with Trails in the Sky second chapter remake and Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. That is just incredible. But I really wish that Falcom and Nintendo got together to kind of change things. But to be honest, there's not really much anybody can do. Everybody is kind of just like moving everything away from Grand Theft Auto. That seems to be the thing. I don't think the Falcom developers are like, oh my gosh, we did it because of Grand Theft Auto. I don't think they would put it in September because of that. I think they put it in September because they just wanted to release it in September. I think the last game, last year, Trails in the Sky First Chapter came out in September as well. So I think they were always going to target that September. And unfortunately, it was just targeting the same thing Nintendo had. Because remember, when it comes to Trails in the Sky First Chapter, once again, September. But for the Nintendo Direct last year with Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, it just said 2026. We didn't have any release date or anything like that. We had to wait all the way, I think, to the next Nintendo Direct in June to finally get the release date here in September. So I'm not sure Nintendo was even sure exactly where it was going to be. I think they had an idea, but they weren't sure exactly where it was going to be. So it was just unfortunate. And obviously Falcom had a target for September that they wanted to go to. So Sucks that they're both in September, but at the same time, I mean, I'm going to support both of them. Of course, I got to play Fire Emblem first, though, but I'll be picking up Trails in the Sky second chapter, and I'll be displaying it on my shelf until I'm done with Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. But I'll definitely open it up and just play for a bit just so I can get some footage and talk to you guys a bit about the improvements and kind of what I like about it. But Fire Emblem's going to be the main concern there when it comes to September 17th for me, at least. But what do you think about everything that we talked about when it comes to what's happening with the Switch 2 sales and kind of the false things by Bloomberg there? Also, Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave and Trails in the Sky second chapter. Let me know in the comment section below. All right, peeps, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you for the next one. Peace.